Hey everybody, we got Chris here, Mr. Instructor Chris Urrutia. I didn't do the R roll that time. I can't do it every time, or else it feels forced.
You get used to it too. You know, you don't want to.
Right.
You want to keep them coming back.
We got somebody shooting on the other side of the wall over there on the 100-yard range too. So if you hear the occasional boom, that is just the wonderful sounds of a working range. Mm-hmm. So Chris, we're going to talk today a little bit about shooting with the weak hand or weak side. You have both a pistol and a carbine behind us for that conversation. Now, the conversation can kind of go two different directions, really, because there's the whole, we use the blanket term, tactical side of things, whether that's in a professional role in some sort of a stack and doing CQB, or whether it's a home defensive type thing or something along those lines. There's that, and then there is, of course, the competition realm, where shooting with the weak hand or weak side may be required for some sort of a stage, something like that. I'm sure we'll get more into it.
Right.
But first things first, Chris, as far as training goes, I think, you see people out there, they train weak side. Maybe some people are wondering, is that something that I should do more of? Like, is there a big priority for me to learn how to shoot both right and left-handed? Is there something there that maybe somebody's missing by not doing a lot? What do you think?
I think it just depends on your context, right? I wouldn't prioritize it. Yeah. Like starting off, I would get used to holding the gun and being able to shoot it and almost kind of eliminate your trigger finger, maybe, and like spending a bunch of time just getting to shoot straight and fast
with your strong hand inside.
What a lot of people call freestyle, right? And
okay.
That's what you call it in competition. Just train holding the gun right and just running through the trigger and shooting straight.
Yeah.
And then you start injecting performance and do that fast, right? I wouldn't, on the front end, I wouldn't prioritize like shooting with the opposite shoulder or weak side only.
Okay, got it.
So
somebody isn't lacking this hugely, tremendously important side of shooting by really focusing on that freestyle, like you called it, right away, and realistically speaking, most of the time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you start getting into the performance shooting side of things, one of the interesting times, like I did a USPSA match last year, and I was asked to shoot with my weak hand, shooting a pistol. And, of course, there's the PCC side of things where you'd have to shoot just full-on left-handed with the left shoulder and probably the left eye, I'd imagine, which would be interesting because that's not my strong eye. And in those cases, you're actually required to do it. And if you're trying to achieve some level of, USPSA stardom or whatever it is in that particular classification, you need to be... You actually probably need to train some performance into that, right?
Yeah, and I can speak to that just based on we just shot a match second week in October here, and one of the classifiers, and I hate to like come off like I'm a classifier chaser, but that's kind of where I'm at. You know what I mean? For me, finishing relatively close to the top in the overall, like I'm okay with finishing top 10, top 5, somewhere in there. But I feel like in order to meet my goals that I've kind of set for myself now, I have to become proficient with shooting weak-handed. You know what I mean? I shoot carry optics. I don't shoot PCC. So for me, it's whether out of the holster I'm transitioning to my weak side, or like out of a reload I'm transitioning to the weak side. Different hand start positions to a weak side transition. So I've kind of accepted that to meet my goals, yes, I have to put in some level of time and meet a level of performance standard I've set for myself in shooting with my weak hand.
Okay.
So
how does one train that? Let's say somebody who's listening on here is actually, they're looking to do something like that. How does one train it? Is it you just do everything that you already do freestyle or with your strong hand and you just do it with the other hand, or is there some level of, hey, I got to do things differently because my body's just not used to this?
Yeah. First of all, in USPSA, as far as I'm fairly new, guys, to USPSA. I'll be in November. I'll be shooting my 12th match.
Okay.
Right. To this day, I've not been asked in competition to shoot two-handed with the weak side being the firing hand. Does that make sense? So every time I shoot left-handed, in competition, it's the only hand that's on the gun,
Okay.
right? So I took when I first got this job in the first year, I took a Matt Pranka course, X-Ray Alpha, and he took us through some weak side only stuff, and I also trained with Bill Blowers, also a big influence in a lot of what I do today, weak side only, and he had us try a couple different things, right? And so that's what I recommend, right? Like my hands are built a lot differently than like maybe some of the listeners will, and I just recommend like safely transition the hand or the gun to your left hand or to your weak side, and then start figuring things out, right? Some things to look for are what my dot's doing in recoil, right? Am I gripping the gun in a way that allows me to run through the trigger without interrupting the dot before the shot's had a chance to leave the barrel, right? And change things up, change the way you approach gripping the hand with your, and of course, guys, I'm kind of using my left hand as an example for those of you guys kind of just listening on podcast platforms, but I use my fingertips
Sure.
on my grip hand, and that's kind of what allows me to bring as much of the meaty portion of my thumb onto the gun, right? So I buy a lot of that stability back that I lose essentially because I don't have two hands on the gun.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the next part of that is, experiment what you want to do with your thumb, right? If you're honestly in times where I just leave my thumb and it's kind of hanging out, of course you're going to get recoil that goes path of least resistance because I don't have any pressure into the gun.
Sure. Yeah. It's not going straight up and down. It's kind of going up and diagonal a little bit.
So one of the things Bill had us do was just dig the inside of your thumb into the what would be the right side of the frame, and just maybe do it in a way that allows the dot to lift and both return in a predictable way.
Yeah.
Right. And also, like another thing that I'm really conscious about when I shoot left-handed only is which direction my elbow is pointed. Right.
Sure.
Blast from the past in law enforcement. I was always taught that if you are shooting one-handed, it's okay to kind of 45-degree cant the gun.
Yeah.
Right. But what I find when shooting for performance, if you do that, then the gun's going to lift in this direction. It's not very predictable to, the dot lift pattern that I see freestyle. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. You know what I mean? So typically I will cam my elbow in a little bit and just allows the gun to just lift and drop, lift and drop, lift and drop. And I've actually been pretty happy with my performance in training and obviously in live classifiers and on stages with doing all those things in concert and the performance I've been able to squeeze out of my left hand. So,
are you using, out of curiosity, are you using your dominant right eye with the red dot when you're shooting left-handed?
Yeah.
Okay.
I might be a weird one. I've yet to bounce that off of anybody else, but if one, say a stage, it may require like a string of fire freestyle and then a transition to the right hand. I just find myself indexing the dot, the window in front of my right eye.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember.
A lot of times the gun is already up, your right eye has already been looking through the dot, and so you just that kind of makes you have to bring do you bring your left arm over the center a little bit, or do you kind of cant your head?
I don't move my head. I try not to move my head. I'll just typically just the action of bringing my elbow in, digging my meaty portion of my thumb into the gun and then camming my thumb into the gun kind of does the job of putting the window right where it needs to be for me.
Okay.
And as an added bonus, I got a pretty stable and pretty repeatable dot lift.
Right.
For me. So.
Right. All right.
Now others, I don't know. Maybe some of the viewers may have a different opinion. Maybe when they transition hands, they used that left eye, but I just don't.
That'd be pretty impressive.
That would.
If your brain can just quickly be like, nope, using the other one now.
This guy, nah, not so much.
If you can, please comment.
Yes, drop it below.
You're a bit of an outlier, I believe.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yep.
We should study you.
Yes.
For science. For science.
We'll do science on you.
How about on the tactical side of things?
Yep.
So I see videos and people look mighty cool when they have, carbine, maybe a pistol. I oftentimes see it with the carbine. They look mighty cool when they're switching shoulders and all that stuff. Is that like what's practical use of that?
Yeah. So like we were talking before, right? Like I can think of 2 specific times that I would do that. Of course, both, tactical situations. I don't compete in PCC. Like you mentioned before, like those guys have to switch shoulders for certain stages and certain classifiers.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like
on the
it's
competition
required.
side. Yeah.
Right. But again, that's not my reality. That's not how I compete. So I don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell this story kind of here in a bit, but like if I'm behind cover,
Yeah.
right? Like not concealment. I'm behind something that will impact the trajectory of a bullet as to not cause it to enter my body.
What would be an example of concealment versus cover?
So I would say if I'm like on the inside of a residential structure,
Yeah.
right? If I'm on behind a wall that's plywood and or drywall, yeah, I'm probably not going to stand there and take the time to transition to minimize myself, knowing that like no matter what I do, those bullets are going to have an easy way of getting to me. Like I would change angles. I would create a better situation than just like doing this and just standing in one place, right? Otherwise,
like if you had, so when you're saying, if you had like legit cover, let's say you're
like a brick wall. Like,
something that's thick that's actually going to likely stop or significantly alter the trajectory of a bullet.
Yep.
And you're going to be like posted up in one spot for a bit, giving cover of some sort.
Yep.
That's where you may, provided that, all of the, it's a directional thing, right?
Right.
If you're a right-handed person and you're going to be doing that, you're going to be looking to the right, then that may be easier to switch over to your left shoulder, you're saying, than having to be the guy who's like all bent out.
Who's doing this craziness and exposing a bunch of themselves, right?
Right.
Some may argue that maybe even a door jam, like if someone's actively trying to break in my house and I hear that happening, and I've got all my loved ones kind of secure, and now I'm just kind of like holding long per se on a door jam. Some may say that maybe a door jam is hard enough to where they feel comfortable, transitioning shoulders and minimizing your exposure, right? But yeah, other than that, I don't know where else. Like when we do CQB here as a team, like I find myself, I haven't done it yet consciously. Like I don't find myself like approaching a room and thinking, oh, I need to swap shoulders.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like if in terms of entering a room, like I think that footwork and spacing and the actions before you enter the room kind of lend themselves to getting an advantage and clearing as much of the room before you get in it anyway. Kind of almost not completely removes the requirement for swapping shoulders, but it helps you big time.
Yeah.
It helps you regardless of what you're doing and what you can conceive doing with your shoulders.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
one, I mean, who am I to speak? Because I don't find myself, and I have never found myself in these types of situations. But it seems like it's a transition either way. Even if you're really fast at it, which I've seen plenty of people who can do it, and they're like, you blink and they've kind of done it. Right. But it's a transition, so it's a period of time where you're kind of not able to shoot the gun.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Or do something with the gun that you otherwise might be able to if you just had it at a low ready or something like that with your strong side. And so if you're doing that over and over and you're like, oh, now I'm coming up on this wall, I'm going to switch my shoulders. And then, I'm in and I'm going to switch my shoulders again. If you're doing that a lot, then it's a lot of downtime, essentially, that adds up.
There's a lot of downtime and there's a lot that can go wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like maybe not this stock, but other stocks I've found that when I go to lift, like separate the stock from my shoulder and lift and put the stock in my opposite shoulder, like shirts get tangled up, right?
Sure.
It all depends on like, am I completely slung into the gun or am I wearing the sling as a necklace? That's going to help. Like there's just a lot. There's many conscious decisions that you have to take in order to make a shoulder transition more feasible and less likely to get all tangled up and jacked up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
well, and to think about it as well, like if you're somebody listening to this podcast and you're not yet super trained up on weak side, it's something that you're going to have to train a lot. You've probably trained basically without realizing it your entire life to use a certain side more dominantly than the other. And so you have to wonder what's the worst of the two potential less ideal scenarios, like going into a situation and using your weak side, or going into a situation and using your strong side, but maybe you've exposed yourself a hair more. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know what is worse, but I feel like, I relate a lot of things back to sports, which, it probably shows there's probably some people out there who are like, sports are lame, whatever.
Oh, I do sports.
Right. But, I've played basketball, and I used to think, it'd be really neat if I learned how to shoot with my right hand, because I'm actually, when I play basketball, I'm a lefty, which is super weird. But I was like, it'd be really cool if I learned how to shoot with my right hand. I could be like the ultimate basketball player. And I'd practice it and practice it and practice it. I'm wasting all this practice time, like trying to teach myself how to shoot right-handed, and it's, it's not really going as well as it should. And then every time I'm in a game and it's like, oh yeah, like boom, like there's just this instant moment where I can either shoot it or not. Mm-hmm. I always wind up shooting with my left hand because it's like, well, that's what I know. I'm not going to like risk this moment. So, of course, this is not a life or death situation that I'm referring to, but that also shows the fact that even if I'm doing that in a not potentially life-threatening situation where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to take the risk that I'm going to brick this.
Right.
I'm just going to shoot it with my dominant hand.
There's still a conscious decision that occurs there. Like
there is. And so it's kind of like, all right, well, if you're going to find yourself in the situation where, all right, this is it, you get sort of one of those situations that occur. It's not like you can hit restart or anything like that, like a video game. It's like, well, I don't know. That's a decision you got to make. But
absolutely.
It's like maybe your strong side is the best one to use.
I recommend, if it's something that interests you, or you have a context that you've developed that you think it can be a valuable tool, then train it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Take 5-10 minutes, here and there, and just sprinkle it into your training program. Do it so that if you ever find yourself in a situation, you're like, man, it'd be really cool and useful to be able to shoot with my weak side right now. Mm-hmm. Then at least it's like, oh, I've kind of done that a little bit.
It's not the first time I'm doing
it. Right. It's not completely like a new thing. I would. Right. If you're curious about it, I would do it.
Right. Well, because there is always and you can play yourself into the worst case scenarios to basically to death. But there is always what happens if your strong side becomes inoperable? Mm-hmm. And now you're forced to use your weak side. Well, yeah, it might be nice if that wasn't the first time you ever tried it.
Right.
But referring to, what was I thinking of when it came to the weak side?
Basketball.
Well, no, it wasn't basketball, but that's a good question. Maybe it's because the basketball season just kicked off here recently. But, it's... Oh, I remember. Training it. Do you ever find that training weak side, like going back to the pistol, because you actually do train weak side pistol, a lot. You try to get better at it performance-wise. Right. Do you find that... because you're having to be so much more conscious about the ways that your body is functioning, right? When you shoot strong hand, you've gotten to the point now where it's much more subconscious. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you go to the weak side and you're like, all right, now I have to be way more conscious about this. I have to really make sure I'm doing everything right. You ever find that that's actually like a good training tool just for your all-around shooting? It's almost like a reset, or a bit, it's in a way almost meditative, because you're like, all right, it's been so long that I've been shooting based on subconscious stuff. Now to go back to the conscious realm, if you will, of shooting and be focusing on these things. Maybe you find somewhere where you're like, oh, actually that's something I've been screwing up even with my strong side, but I just never realized it because I've been doing it subconsciously so much.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think the weaknesses that I will pick up on when I am either training or actually shooting weak side only, I'll be like, well, let me audit that, make sure I'm not doing that, strong side only, or even freestyle, right?
Yeah.
Like I talked about before, like I believe in putting processes to everything you do, like whether that's developing a training plan or even in the way you carry out a shooting task. Like if I have a process by which I get to the point of breaking the shot, then I have something to break down and kind of ask, well, I didn't get the desired results on target. Where in the process did things fall off for me? Mm-hmm. And I find myself like really having to maybe not consciously control every single action, But I know I'm getting pretty wordy here, but like when I transition to the weak side,
Okay.
it's simple for me. It's hold the gun right, and that jumbles in like where my fingers are, the type of tension I'm putting with my thumb, and what I'm doing with my thumb and camming into the gun, right? So that's that. Hold the gun right.
Yeah.
Right. And then the next thing is connect to the target, see the dot, right? And that's where like your grip will really help you in your index, right? And then next thing is break the shot, right? So I lump those are lumps of individual processes, but when I'm not getting the desired results, or even when I am, I'm like, well, let me make sure. So now I get to hold the gun freestyle. I need to make sure that I'm applying all those things and making sure that I can run the trigger aggressively and not move the gun.
Yeah.
Right. So, it absolutely, training weak side can expose or even cause you to audit yourself in everything else. Mm-hmm. Right. Because the same level of tension, the same level of focus it takes to be able to do this strong side only, or even this and break a good clean shot without moving the dot. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the same thing required. I may be controlling things a little more consciously with my weak side, right? But yeah, it can absolutely lend itself to doing everything else that much better, I would say.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I think it makes sense. I mean, based on everything we talked about, it's kind of like there is, in terms of your use, you may have a complete, absolute, yes, I know I'll be using it in that competition sense. Or there may be the like, well, maybe I'll use it. It's hard to say now. I don't know. But, I mean, either way, it's not a detractor to go about trying it occasionally. But what I hear you saying, it sounds like, don't make it the biggest priority probably in your training, because there are things that are more important.
Right.
It's a lot like we talk about this all the time when people are considering buying an optic. I'll make the parallel here. It sounds random, but
get you an optic that you can shoot from both shoulders. I would highly recommend doing that.
You want to get an ambidextrous optic.
Yeah,
no,
for sure.
What I was thinking is that people ask, they're like, well, okay, I want to get a hunting scope and I want to get it for shooting long range, but I'll occasionally go hunting with it maybe.
Right.
And you're like, okay, what are you going to do with it 90 to 95% of the time? You're like, long range. And it's like, all right, so you can go hunting with a long-range optic, for whitetail at 150 yards. Maybe it's not the one that most people will take into the woods because it's probably going to be a little bit heavier, a little bit more, just things you don't need. But let's get you the scope for the thing that you're going to do 95% of the time. I think when you're training, it's kind of like, you may run into a situation 5 to 1% of the time that, we want to make sure that you can at least handle that situation. But let's train for your 90 to 90% use, which in this whole case, which is where I bring the parallel back, is probably going to be your strong side.
Yeah, absolutely. So my training, like when I get in the morning, I like to put in 15 minutes of dry fire in, right? Yeah. And then maybe before I leave for the day, I'll put in another 15 minutes. That prevents me from like taking up any personal time at home. You know what I mean? Of course, I'm blessed enough to work here full time, and I get to do that, I do count myself as very blessed and fortunate, right? However, if this is one of the things that you really want to get good at, like shooting, right? You're gonna have to either wake up early or invest time personally into doing these things. So, of those 30 minutes a day, and I credit Steve Anderson for this, but he has a 12-step. Not a step, but like a 12 drill training program that I tend to go back to every so often to kind of audit things. In my dry fire book, like I've got those 12 drills kind of written down, and they're pretty evenly split. I would say like it's 6 or 7 where it's nothing but strong side only.
Okay.
Right. Actually, it's more. I wish I had my book on me, but it's like 7 or 8 drills that are solely strong side only.
Yep.
Right. And then there's those last 4 that do include that do sprinkle in just weak side only, transitions to the weak side, reloads then weak side, and different situations that do pop up every so often at matches. Right.
Yeah.
And so, in the grand scheme of things, if you take my 30 minutes a day example, I'm probably investing, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 minutes total a week into practicing with my weak side, right? And now now we take it into like a tactical sense, like on the CQB side. I hardly ever transition anymore these days to the weak shoulder.
Right.
You know what I mean? In fact, I just told the guys up front like this story. I went through WIPS, which is the World Protective Services contract. It's the school that either allows you or gets you kicked out of contracting.
Okay.
I left policing and SWAT in 2014, and then immediately went to contracting. Before leaving for WIPS, I had spent so many years with SWAT. And we were a team that believed that you got to be able to move the gun around and throw that thing to your support side every so often. So anyway, fast forward to WIPS, and I remember very vividly we were going down a hallway during one of the CQB portion of the school, and there I am, high speed Chris, and I transitioned to my left shoulder, and I picked the gun up with my left eye. This comes off the heels of qualifying. Like we had spent the last 2 or 3 days before that qualifying.
Yeah.
Right. Everything strong side.
Yeah.
There's not a semblance of weak side shoulder anything. You know what I mean? Or weak side hand. Anyway, and suddenly I hear stop, and I go, and I'm of course like holding. I can't even. I mean, it feels weird just doing it. And the instructor up top goes, during the last 3 days, did you qualify at all with your left hand? And I go, no. I go, then why are you doing that? And I didn't have a good answer. I mean, like, all right. So, mentally I had to take, weak side shoulder transition Chris out back and like put him out the pasture. You know what I mean? Like, I guess this is not.
How was that?
Yeah. So, the version of me that wanted to graduate that school and potentially go on to the contract, like, yeah, I had to kind of put that dude out the pasture a little bit. You know what I mean? So it's not something I've ever picked back up. You know what I mean? And the more and more we do CQB here as a team, the less and less it's even a thought. You know what I mean?
How about that?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people who have thoughts on it themselves.
Yeah,
and I'm
absolutely.
sure that by now, if they haven't already, they can drop those comments and thoughts
Mm-hmm.
down there in the comments section on YouTube or on Instagram, whatever works best. But yeah, no, I appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah,
Thanks. Anything else that you want to toss out there about the old weak side shooting before we depart?
I'd say, guys, just do it. You know what I mean? There's plenty of resources out there that will show you how to do it right. And if there's anything specifically that you would like for us to put out, then put it in the comments, man. We'll show you how to do stuff.
Cool.
Yep.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. See you on the next one.
That's a wrap, everybody. Hope you liked this topic. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and of course, subscribe right here because there's going to be plenty more to come. If there's topics you'd like to hear us go over on the Vortex Edge podcast in the future, you can let us know by commenting below or hitting us up on Instagram, which is @Vortex Edge. We'd love to hear your suggestions so we can be bringing you the kind of episodes and topics that you want to hear. Otherwise, we'll be seeing you on a future episode. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Bye.